On today's Locked On Bucks, we get a Khris Middleton performance for the ages, a valiant effort by the Bucks coming back from a spot where it appeared they were left for dead, and the postseason essentially debut for all intents and purposes of Andre Jackson Jr., but it still results in a loss. So the Bucks now in a 2-1 hole. How do they climb out of this? Frank and I take a look at that and some of the latest coming out of the locker room coming up after this on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined by Frank Madden, as we're here to recap the 121-118 overtime loss in Game 3 of this first round series. We thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen each and every day, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You can find it on YouTube as well, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Frank, look, there's a lot of Bucks fans that I think probably tuned out in the last couple of minutes of the first quarter and thought, here we go again. And that group, when they wake up to see the score tomorrow, are going to be stunned. That's all well and good. I've talked to a few people that have said, hey, there's a lot of positives to take away from this. And there are, but this is not a team that is in the market for moral victories. And now for the second consecutive year, you're in a spot where you're in a 2-1 hole. You don't know if Giannis is going to return in this series. And I do think we cannot state that enough. Everybody keeps saying, well, if they lose, he'll come back for this game, or maybe they'll save him for this game. I think you have to approach this series thinking he is not going to play. And now you're in a spot where you got to win 3 out of the next 4 games and do that on the road as well.
Yeah, you got to win 3 out of 4 against a team that has beaten you 6 of 8, right? Those odds ain't great. We're starting with the negative Nelly energy. So I'm going to flip it on you, Justin. Khris Middleton appreciation podcast.
Yeah,
let's start this with the Khris Middleton
Let's do
appreciation.
that instead.
I mean, Khris gets the injury early in Game 2, twists the ankle. He comes back, plays 30 plus minutes after turning the ankle pretty early. I mean, I said when we were talking post game with Camille, I said let's see how that thing swells up over the next couple of days, right? Like, I mean, you've seen this. Yeah, it's happened to Giannis too, where Giannis will play through a sprain in a game and then he's misses the next game because sometimes you can just fight through it. I mean, that's even normal people will have this experience, right? You turn an ankle doing something, you kind of can go through it and not worry about it for the rest of your afternoon, and then the next day it's really swollen, and that also happens to elite athletes. And Khris obviously, let's just say, does not have the Giannis Wolverine healing factor. So I was a bit nervous. When I saw he was questionable, I thought, okay, he's going to play. If he's questionable, it's the playoffs, he's going to play. He does play. And, he was the only steady thing the Bucks had all game, right? And I think just deserves so much credit. To put up 42. I know he had 40 in that finals, Game 4, I think it was, in 2021. I think he had 39 in Game 6 against the Nets. Yeah. So to put up a playoff career high, at a stage when, the negative Middleton people were coming out and using the fact that he was on the injury list as, a reason to freaking try to bury Khris Middleton and, bad contract, all this stuff, should have traded him, blah, blah, blah. To come back with that performance, and, against a guy in Aaron Nesmith, who's a good defender. And I mean, they have been battling all series, and 3 games in now after that 42-point performance, Khris is averaging over 27 points a game. He's been, he's done everything you could hope that Khris Middleton, could do. And Dame Lillard did not have a good shooting night tonight. Started off really, really slow from deep. The whole Bucks team did. But Dame began to put it together a bit in the second half, got to the line pretty effectively, hit a couple pull-up threes in that fourth quarter, or second half, I should say. So, I mean, Dame came around too. What do you have, 28 points, I think. But unfortunately, this was the game that he was, hobbled early and then kind of gutting through to the end. And, I think Doc even said at the end, Dame was just basically like, hey, just use me as a decoy on these last plays because he just did not have any explosion. So now we'll play. Now you only have one day off, and we're going to play this game of not knowing what Dame's availability is going to be on Sunday, let alone Giannis, who I mean, Giannis isn't even at the point of like practicing or like going through pregame workouts. I mean, he's out like even before. He's not even a game time decision. So like he obviously is not close. So yeah, I mean, Khris, the shot making, he got to the rim a bit, that play where he just diced up Miles Turner to get to the rim for a lefty finish. And then just those two monster clutch threes at the end of regulation and then late in overtime. Obviously the overtime one was banked in, so certainly some luck there, but the shot that he hit to send it to overtime with 1.4, whatever was left, shades of that Boston three that he hit, I guess whatever it was, 2018. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, look, is Khris the same guy he was, in 2021? Physically, no, I don't think he is. But I thought his defense was really good today. I mean, Bucks could not grab a rebound to save their lives. We'll talk more about that. That is why they lost this game. But I thought that was just a fantastic performance from Khris Middleton. I mean, I think hopefully people, regardless of what happens in this series, what happens next year or whatever else may happen with Khris and his future, I hope people always remember the day that, Khris Middleton showed up with a bum ankle, played, dominated, and did absolutely everything you could have hoped for to try to win you a playoff game. Because again, that was just another example of this guy being a big time player. And, it's been a privilege watching this guy for a decade plus, and he just did it again tonight. And again, they're going to need more of this at some point from Khris. Maybe not 42 points. They're going to need more from him. I don't know what he's going to have in the gas tank on Sunday. But that's partly why obviously this is such a tough game to lose, because you wasted, one of the all-time Khris Middleton games.
Well, and that's what's been tough about the last two games. And I know the scores were double-digit deficits in both of the first two games. But in game two, you wasted another good Damian Lillard game. And granted, there was a lot that went wrong in that game, but you had another very solid, consistent Damian Lillard game. We've seen him do that consistently in the postseason from afar. It's just been 3 games now that the Bucks have had Dame, but that wasn't the version you got in the regular season. So part of you was, man, you didn't consistently get this, and now you got it 2 games in a row, and you wasted one of them. This one even more so. You can point to the resolve the Bucks showed, and they did, and that is worth pointing out, that this team could have very easily packed it in and quit and said, Dame went down, we don't know what his status is, it's already a 19-point deficit, it's over, and we're playing without Giannis. But they didn't, and they slowly started to mount that comeback. But this was it was there for the taking. You get that performance from Khris Middleton. That's what makes this very frustrating, knowing what you're up against. I'll say this, and you mentioned the success the Pacers have had against the Bucks this season. Look, I know there's a lot of doomers out there, but it's still not last year. This is not the Miami Heat. This is not Eric Spoelstra. This is not Jimmy Butler. It's not a team with all that experience that has been through the fire in the postseason, but it's still not a spot that you want to be in, especially as you don't know if Giannis is going to play in this series. And now the Damian Lillard element enters the conversation of what is he going to be like? And are you going to say to Khris Middleton once more, hey, we're going to need you to do it again? Because that to me is the big takeaway, is that, I think there's a handful of us that have been pretty vocal in our support of Khris Middleton and how unfairly he gets recognized by his own fan base at times. He is the guy that has consistently showed you this through the last 6 years in the postseason. In 2021, it's well documented. We've talked about it before. He's the guy. Giannis will get the attention. Khris hit the game winner in game 1 against the Heat. Who knows where the series goes if you lose that game? For all intents and purposes, he hit the game-winning shot in overtime against the Brooklyn Nets in that closeout game. You mentioned his 40-point game in game 6 of that series as well. He had a big game. He was a big reason why they closed out the Hawks without Giannis, and, of course, what he did in the finals. So this guy has consistently been the guy that has carried your half-court offense through the years in the playoffs in the biggest spots, and he did it once again tonight, but this was one of those occasions where the rest of the team just couldn't rise up to meet him.
Yeah, and just looking back too, even last year, right? As forgettable as that
Yeah.
series was, Khris Middleton, 24 points, 6 and 6 on 60+% true shooting, something like that, right? After a full year of worrying that Khris was not going to be able to ramp
Never
up
going to be the
and
same.
play
Yeah.
the minutes to be able to be as effective as you need to be in the playoffs. He was, again, like nobody was good in the crunch time of that series against the Heat, but overall, like Chris's numbers were terrific, right? Like, and you kind of hit on it, right? I think I don't have the updated kind of team stats, but if you told us coming into the series that in the first 3 games you wouldn't have Giannis, but Khris would put up 27 points a game on whatever, some sort of high efficiency. I'm sure it's over 60% true shooting. Dame was going to put up, I think he's averaging like 32 points a game right
Yeah.
now in the series on high efficiency. He got to the line, what, 12 of 12 today, I think, 12 free
Yep.
throws. Only 2 turnovers. Khris only 3 turnovers, 5 assists in 41 minutes. You would say, geez, take that every day, right? Like
Yeah.
if
Is
you
it
could be
3-0 Bucks?
yeah, I know. If you could be getting like, if you were getting this version of these guys, and again, like take away some usage, but if Giannis is healthy and you're getting this version of those guys, like you feel like, man, the Bucks are, a death machine again. Like, look out, here we go, right? But the playoffs are not fair. Like, the thing I always come back to, the playoffs are just a series of small sample sizes. When you have injuries, everything goes out the window. And look, with the way that this team finished the year over the past couple months, I was emotionally prepared for anything to happen in this series, right? I had, God bless people that thought, the Bucks were going to win this series regardless of Giannis playing, or people who thought
Yeah.
that Giannis was just going to magically be healthy for game 1 and just, act like nothing had happened.
It depends on what they do. If they lose, he'll play.
But again, it's like it just shows you, I think, how it's the sport. You just never know what's going to happen, and as we said, like now you're up against it, and I think the biggest concern is specifically Dame's injury and Chris's like fatigue factor, and the fact that he's carrying an injury, and he just emptied the clip basically here on Friday. Like what is anybody going to have left on Sunday against a really young Pacers team that now is feeling probably pretty good about themselves
Pretty good.
and escaped a game in which they missed a ton of, they made threes early, but then they missed an absolute ton of shots. They were 26% from three. But I thought the last 10 minutes of the game, the Bucks looked very slow and old defensively not in terms of how they were kind of starting possessions, because I think they played a lot of really good initial defense, but the problem was they just could not end possessions. I mean, I tweeted out at one point, like the Bucks, cannot end a possession, save their lives. And then they literally gave up 4 straight offensive rebounds directly after that tweet. Like, what were there like 6 chances on that one possession that
Yes.
the Pacers had? I mean, they took 105 shots. What did they take? Like 20 shots more than the Bucks, something like that. And
17.
even with the Bucks taking a ton of free throws, like that's just really hard to overcome. Pacers didn't turn the ball over, and I looked at the half court numbers. I think the Pacers had a 93 rating on first shots in half court, but 47% offensive rebound rate. Like anything over 30 is very good.
Yeah.
47% offensive rebound rate in half court, and again, like it's kind of funny. It's like look, I thought Bobby Portis had a generally poor game. He definitely was able to get buckets and score points in the second half. I thought individually he played pretty well against Siakam, actually. But, again, just as a help defender, he's going to struggle, and his shot was not there for most of the game. He had a great look that would have put the Bucks up 6 in the fourth quarter when they were up 3. There was 95-92, and he had a wide open 3, and the shot was not falling consistently today. So again, not to like overly pick on Bobby, but it hasn't been a great series from him. I said it was going to be a litmus test series for him. He's generally been great when Giannis doesn't play, 21-11 this year, but he has not been great. And defensively, he's always obviously giving up stuff, and it's challenging. So, and Brook, I mean, I think, look, people who like dog Brook, I mean, regular season, like, I mean, you're an idiot if you think the Bucks are not desperately dependent on Brooke Lopez defensively. I mean, they gave up a 122 defensive rating when Brooke was off the floor this year. Like, abominable. Like, they literally cannot defend even when Giannis is on the floor when Brooke is off the floor during the regular season. But they've obviously like had problems. They had problems in the regular season defending Turner with Brooke. They obviously went to Brooke on Siakam. That didn't work. They went back to Brooke on Turner today. Turner had another good game. Siakam did not. So I think that was at least something. And Halliburton, I thought was good. I thought he was effective, but he didn't shoot well from three and was not an efficient scorer. So again, like, you talk about like 3 games in, like if you told us that Tyrese Halliburton would be putting up, I don't have his numbers in front of me, but whatever his numbers are, whatever his shooting splits are, you'd be like, oh man, that's perfect. Like, couldn't hope for more than that. But, his playmaking has been really good. And, I kind of, looking back on that, the late game stuff, I saw some people like on Twitter and Real GM and stuff saying like, oh, like they got to put in someone literally said, put in a rebounder. It's like, okay, Giannis is not playing.
Right. Who's that guy?
You have Bobby and Brooke, literally the only big guys that play for this team. People say, oh, Brooke doesn't get rebound. Well, yeah, but he's like, they're always way better. I mean, his entire career teams have been better.
Creates the opportunities.
He boxes out and they're always better at rebounding when he's on the floor. And Bobby is obviously a guy that gets rebounds. Is he the best rebounder in the world? Maybe not. But like Andre Jackson isn't magically like getting all the rebounds if you put him in. I think you can certainly say that they would have been better off finding a way to get him on the floor potentially for Bobby late in the game. Because I thought, we should definitely talk about him and what he brought in his minutes to kind of turn the tide a little bit defensively. But I don't know. I mean, like, you'd have to look at the tape again and like, well, why could they just literally not get a rebound? Honestly, I think a lot of it was just they were dead tired from coming back. And this team is old and they're playing a young team. And that young team, it's interesting. I mean, the Pacers are clearly not afraid one bit of the Bucks running on them, crashing the boards and having the Bucks run on them, going back the other way. Khris Middleton got fouled, almost had that dunk, and maybe should have gotten a flagrant foul. In late in the game. But other than that, like they're not worried about the Bucks hurting them if they crash the boards. Meanwhile, the Bucks are like terrified of the Pacers doing that to them. So there's a huge advantage on the glass for the Pacers in this series because of that dynamic. But again, like is a smaller line like what Jay Crowder is gonna? I don't know, right? Like Pat Connaughton, like Pat probably deserved. Like I probably wanted to see a little bit more of Pat, but whatever, this was just one of those games like where part of it is effort and hustle and crashing the glass. And some of it too, it just felt like every time like there was a ball slapped away, like the Bucks would like deflect the pass and it would go back to the Pacers. It felt like one of those games where just like little stuff or like Khris corralling a rebound, but then like barely going out of bounds. I think that was in overtime or late in the fourth quarter.
Late in the fourth.
Just like that small stuff, man, it just adds up. And, it just at the end of regulation, it felt like, man, they pissed away this chance, and then Khris gives them another chance at it in overtime. But same story, right? And you can say, well, like Siakam may have fouled Bobby on the rebound he got and the putback that was kind of the decisive play. I mean, look, the Pacers, I think, created their own luck in this game to a large extent, and I think they deserve credit. And again, I think there were obviously positives for the Bucks in the way that they were able to find some things at times, and I thought the zone worked pretty well when they went to that, and it kind of changed things up for them. But yeah, that's a really tough game to lose in a series like this with the concern around Giannis. This feels like the game you kind of needed to win. Like you. This is what turns these kind of close competitive series like the Bucks need to win a game in Indiana. They've lost at home, so they need to win a game in Indiana, and this one was right there. And they weren't able to do it. So, again, not to be fatalistic about it or whatever, but hey, I had no expectations. I still have no expectations. So I'm just going to sit here and say, good job, good effort. Maybe not on the boards, but, I'm just going to celebrate Khris Middleton, and I'll sleep well tonight. And we'll see. We'll see what the injury report says tomorrow going into Sunday.
We'll see what the injury report says. Some of those rebounding things I do want to get to, and most importantly, as you mentioned, we do have to spend some time talking about Andre Jackson Jr. and some of the rotations that we saw here from Doc Rivers, and what that could potentially mean for players like Bobby Portis too, as you take a look at how do you match up with this Indiana Pacers team. So Frank and I will get into that discussion coming up after the break on Locked On Bucks. Well, today's Locked On Bucks is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. There's the 2024 Nissan Rogue. It's perfect for city drives and great escapes. It has class exclusive Google built in as your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. So gone are the days of connecting your phone to that lightning cable. Use Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play stores. They are all built into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. The 2024 Rogue is perfect for mid-size crossovers for your next adventure. Or you could use the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder. It has room for up to 8 in expansive cargo capacity and advanced available 4x4 capability with 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds towing. When adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. And this episode of Locked On Bucks is sponsored by BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest, big or small. Certain things can really start to get to you. So it's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased on your life. So today, as Frank and I have gone through, I want to share something that I feel with the rest of you, and that is I was wrong about Andre Jackson Jr., which we'll get to in the upcoming segment here, but I'm sure we're all dealing with some anxiety and uncertainty about this playoff series. Well, sometimes there's more difficult things to handle in your life than just, is my favorite NBA team going to win? That's where BetterHelp comes in for you. Therapy can be different for everyone, as most of us have bigger problems than what we've just discussed with our favorite sports team. So it's important to get those things off your chest every once in a while. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It is entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA and you'll get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, Frank, we have to get into Andre Jackson Jr. as look, that was probably the guy that fans were calling for the most, not just in this series, but this whole season. I was talking with one of the Pacers beat guys too, just the other day, and after game 2, and he said, man, the crowd, when that Jackson guy entered the game, they really went nuts, and explaining to him, yes, that is the newest pet project for Bucks fans. But I think we talked about this a little bit before the series started, and that I wondered, could he be an X factor in that maybe you could steal 5 or so minutes a game from him and use his athleticism and defense and energy to just throw somebody out there on Tyrese Halliburton. We didn't really see that in the first 2 games. You saw it today. And I think after seeing this, it's going to be impossible to keep him off the floor in this series. You know, you do have to wonder, do we even get to this point if the score isn't 19 and if Damian Lillard doesn't go down, and who knows what that means? But nonetheless, we saw it. He made an impact. And I think the only thing that you would nitpick is, man, the Bucks really started to turn this around and at least put themselves back in the game in the second quarter when he basically played the duration of the quarter. He had some big minutes in the third, but that was the one thing is, you know, I'm not suggesting have him to close the game, but I think there's definitely opportunities for more minutes for Andre Jackson Jr. in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing with him is just the injection of athleticism and, you know, energy that he brings. And I mean, I think I used the phrase "old and slow" like 2 or 3 times in this one podcast to refer to the Bucks, right? And I think that's a phrase that Doc Rivers has used as well to explain like why they switch as much as they do. So I think just, you know, bringing more of the energy to match what the Pacers have with some of their young guys, I think is useful. And especially defensively, I think, you know, it's sort of one of those things. I think maybe we set him up to not fail, but the fact that, AG, Adrian Griffin put him as like a primary ball stopper, like put him on the primary ball handler so much early in the season. I think it's great for his learning. I think it's also like probably not like setting him up to succeed so much because again, the fact that he's very aggressive means that he just, has this like
Gonna get
prodigious foul
fouls.
rate,
Yeah.
And I think that's probably a problem. Like when the other team is in the penalty, like when he came into the game, like in late game situation, he did come back into the game on a number of looking at late game situations. I was just like deathly afraid that he was going to get, a foul call, right? And some of that's like not getting rookie whistle respect. But look, he is very physical and he kind of, hasn't figured out how to kind of find that line between physicality and too much physicality. And I think the other thing too is like without Giannis on the floor, you don't have the same concerns about somebody gumming up the paint with the fact that teams don't respect his shot. So I mean that was always my thing during the regular season was, hey, go put him on the floor as like a power forward, like as the nominal four when Dame is out there.
As the Bucks version of Ben Simmons.
Yeah, just like basically running around, like setting screens. If he takes dump offs, like he can, short roll, make the right read, make a good pass. Certainly he's not going to like take a pass and drive to the basket and dunk because, again, it's crazy. He's so weird. We saw it again tonight when he had that play where he was driving and I think he got stripped in the open floor. Like I've never seen someone who is so hyper athletic, has a pretty good handle, is like has basketball IQ, but literally like when he gets the ball, he has no idea how to like get to the rim and finish. Like he has no, and that's why he doesn't look at the rim, right? It's just like, and he's unselfish too, but he just has no idea what he's supposed to do around the basket. Just no instincts as a finisher, despite again just the tools being off the charts. So I mean that's like obviously the big issue. I don't think he's ever gonna like become a great finisher. But like, man, if he can just harness that athleticism a little bit, I mean, we've seen the 3-point shot's been totally like solid this year, which he deserves credit for. But I think it's really the defensive end where he's obviously a value add, and you can put him on, a ball handler to pressure, to be annoying. But you can also use him, I think, at the top of that zone. You can use him as, put him on a wing or a four and have him switch. I think that's another really useful kind of way to use him is if you've got, like Pat Bev or somebody on the primary ball handler, you can, whoever they want to run pick and roll with, put Andre Jackson on that guy. And then, hey, if they want to do that and just try to get switches with Andre, like, well, like that's okay, right? That's you much rather have Andre than like Bobby or Brooke having to switch. So yeah, I think the energy kind of impact that he brings is sort of just palpable. He had a nice tip dunk today. The offense is going to be a problem. I think, especially in the playoffs, like the scout is going to get out on him and, teams are going to dare him not just to shoot threes, but literally to shoot like anything.
Yep.
And that's obviously just a huge area that he has to improve on. And the other subtle thing that I think is important, the pace, I think one of the biggest problems the Bucks have had is the Pacers have made it so hard just to get the ball up the floor, like the Pacers like are sometimes like getting shots in 4 seconds. The Bucks like, it's like
taking all the time in the world. Like,
yeah,
think of how many times today you thought, are they going to beat an 8-second violation here?
It's like freaking Normandy just trying to like get the ball across midcourt sometimes, and you've got Neesmith on Middleton, like just denying on the perimeter. Obviously, Nembhard has really been physical with Dame, and look, Dame like gets by him whenever he's got space, which is why like Dame has still been really successful. But like, man, he really pressures the ball and makes it hard, which is why they don't give Dame the ball a lot until they're in half court because it's just like too annoying to have to bring the ball up. So Andre Jackson, I don't think they were really putting any pressure on him at all. And he's a good enough handler. He can just sprint up the court and get the ball into half court and get you into your offense. He's not really going to do anything. He's got to then hand it off, but he can at least run a dribble handoff. So that was kind of one of those like subtle things. I actually like that because they do have Pat Bev all the time, but Pat has a hard time bringing the ball up the floor too. And Pat's really not a good passer. Like he was inbounding it at one point late in the game. I was like, Pat's like not really a good passer. So it's one of those things I think that there is a role for him, especially with Giannis out and with Bobby really not distinguishing himself. I mean, Bobby played 44 minutes today. I mean, man, they were only a -1 in his minutes, so I mean, I gotta acknowledge that. But
Yeah, and then
it was
as
rough for stretches.
you kind of mentioned it before too. I think that's a testament and a credit to the way Bobby played late and in the second half, because it was to say he played poorly in the first half would be an understatement. So when you look at
I think he was 1 for
yeah,
6. The only bucket he made was when he blew a layup and he got his own
right,
rebound.
and got his own rebound, and you know, when you look at the box score, you would say, man, if you just watched early on in the game, you think, really, Bobby Portis did that. 18 rebounds, but 1 of 3 on threes. And you know, that's the thing that struck me too, was it was kind of a you're damned if you do and damned if you don't when you look at how the Pacers were attacking the Bucks on the glass, because it did seem like when they really started to piece together some stops and it looked like, okay, they're doing something here, was when they were playing small and Andre Jackson Jr. was on the floor and you just had one big. And when we saw him go to the dual bigs, part of you wondered, I don't know if they're going to be able to keep up with the Pacers in this in terms of their matchup. So you better get all the rebounds in the world if you're playing these two. And that's when it seemed like they struggled the most with their team rebounding, was when Brooke and Bobby were on the floor looking at their bench. And again, that's kind of the predicament the Bucks are in with no Giannis. You got 3 bigs on your team and one of them is out. You're starting the other 2. So I wonder, maybe not changing the starting lineup. I don't think we're going to see that, but for all intents and purposes, the Bucks went 8 deep tonight. It was Pat Connaughton, AJ Green, and Andre Jackson. They're all basically guards. Does that mean you really start to more keep an eye on the splits and some of the staggering between Brooke and Bobby? And do we see earlier exits for one of the two and just going to smaller lineups, knowing we don't have very many options with the bigs, and we've started to find some success here with those guys, with Pat Connaughton, with AJ Green, and with Andre Jackson in this last game?
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting that the first sub that Doc has gone to for, I don't know, I don't remember if they did it in this game as well, but certainly the first 2 games, Malik Beasley for Bobby Portis was the first sub, right? Which,
Yeah.
you know, we see it with Giannis typically being an early sub for Bobby, but there you've got 3 bigs, so you can pretty much always have 2 big men at any given time, whereas now you're, you know, only playing 2, and so you're either got both of them to start or one of them. And you know, especially when Bobby's the only big, like, I mean, I think the results today were actually pretty good when Bobby was
Yeah.
the only big, but like I don't think that's like some sustainable thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you wouldn't look at that
Yeah.
and be like, oh yeah, that makes sense, right? It happened in game 1 as well. Remember the
Yeah.
second quarter of
Yeah.
game 1 when they went on that big run? It's like, but to me, that's more of the Pacers kind of not taking advantage of the personnel. But it is an interesting question. I mean, look, I fully expect Bobby's going to be starting so long as
Mhm.
Giannis is not playing.
Yeah.
But I do think it's an interesting question. Like, would you be better off playing Andre Jackson as like your 4 to start or something like that? And, you know, I don't know, in that scenario, would you put Andre on Siakam, or would you put Khris on Siakam, which we've seen at times? I don't know, but it's
Yeah.
probably irrelevant because they're not going to go to that starting group. But it does certainly, Andre as guarding the 4 is interesting, just because then it kind of, he's not on ball very much, but you know, he can blow up any switch because he's so switchable. So I mean, I think that's the interesting thing. Like I
Yeah.
fully agree. I mean, Andre obviously has made his case that he should have a role with this team. You know, Jay Crowder plays 2 minutes tonight, barely played last game as well. So looks like it's a redux of last year. Can't blame Bud for this one, Jay. But I think Ajax needs to play at least 15 minutes, you know. And I thought AJ Green, you know, the Pacers give up the fewest wide open threes in the league. They really try to take away the 3-point line. That's not their issue defensively. And AJ didn't take a 3 today, but he did have 4 points, hit a mid-range jumper. And so, and I think he's been just very solid defensively, you know. And this has been going on now for a couple months, really,
half
right?
of the season. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, I feel like early in the season, we started to see that I think as a rookie, we saw that he he was very good at being in the right spots, but physically you saw
Limitations.
the limitations. And I don't know how much like weight he might have put on over the summer. He just looks stronger. And I think that he's just become, at least as like an individual defender, I think he's become actually like, I would say like above average, you know?
Yeah.
I think there's certainly, you can question like his team defense. Is he, he's not coming over for help blocks or something. But I think he's really acquitted himself well, and he doesn't really make mistakes defensively, which, is a huge thing when you're a young player. Just don't beat yourself, right? So I think, I hope we see more of him. He has not, I don't know if does he have 1-3 in the series? Maybe.
I think so. Yeah.
He has not shot the ball well from outside, but we know what he's capable of. And, I've been sort of looking at him all year as like the guy that when Malik Beasley presumably leaves in the summer, because the Bucks really can't pay him anything, that, that's like the spot for AJ Green to become, even if he's not starting, that he becomes the designated shooter.
Heavy minutes there. Yeah.
Yeah. And, especially if Giannis is healthy, I think you can argue like, man, you'd probably be better off playing AJ as a starter at this point than going at the bench. But I hope we continue to see, again, is he going to get 30 minutes? No, I don't think that. But I hope we continue to see him getting like 15 minutes at least. And hopefully he's got, a 5-minute run in him where he hits like 3 threes or something like that and can turn the tide of a game. So yeah, again, like I guess like silver line, we were not hoping to have like AJ Green looking playable as like the, silver lining of the playoffs. But I think, we obviously, there's been a lot of complaints about Doc not developing young guys generally. But AJ is a guy that he's trusted for a while now. And, hopefully he can continue to play like this defensively and maybe have a bit more of a breakout offensively. And then hopefully with Ajax, we continue to see them. Basically, he's like forcing them to find minutes for him, which again is hard. Consistency is the enemy of many young player, including I think for him. But yeah, shout out to those guys. Like they're not afraid of the moment, which is, you can't say that about a lot of rookies.
Yeah. Right? Well, does it count for developing a young guy if Doc knew Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was going to be this good and urged the Clippers not to make that deal? And also, AJ actually has no threes in this series. He's only taken 4. And I think that's, you pointed to the way the Pacers defend the perimeter is going to be the challenge. But, I mean, as unfair as it may be, you need AJ Green to take more threes than that. You need AJ Green to take a 3 tonight. And when you look at this team as a whole, again, when we talked about the performances from Dame in the first 2 games, the performance of Khris in this game, you couple that with a version of Tyrese Halliburton that is starkly different from what we saw in the regular season matchups. He's shooting at low 20% on threes in this series and low 40s from the field. He just, up until tonight, didn't really appear to have all that much burst and looked more tentative. That's all of that is what makes it even tougher to swallow being in this 1-2 hole for the Bucks. And I think the last point on Andre is, like, I think all of us were aware this guy does need to play. I think we didn't think he would just because of what you said. And in fairness, it's not just Doc Rivers. It's most coaches. We had the same conversations with Bud, and it's not just Bud. You just don't see young guys getting those minutes for the most part. So I think that was really a lot of the hesitation that we brought. But we've reached the point of, we've seen it in one of these games now. So it just has to continue, especially when there frankly are no other options for the Bucks when you look up and down at who they
just
have.
Play a rebounder, Justin. Just get a rebounder in there.
Just find the rebounder and get them on the floor. We'll take a look at those rebounding issues, where the Bucks go from here, the rest of the outlook for this series, and one other parallel that I think there is from this series to another one that the Bucks were a part of a couple of years ago. So we'll take a look at all that coming up after the break on Locked On Bucks. Well, this episode of Locked On Bucks brought to you by LinkedIn. It isn't just a job board. It helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. in a given month. Over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire, so they are constantly finding ways to make that process easier. Even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process not only easier, but quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. You should as well. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That is linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And Frank, as you know, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel as well. So you can turn off ESPN and Fox Sports and not deal with all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today, here for you, programming the biggest stories of the day from all the local experts you've come to expect from Locked On. Our national shows as well. You get analysis, opinions, news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So one thing I did want to mention is in some ways, and maybe this is just hopium, Frank, but in some ways this series reminds me of, as we mentioned, that Khris Middleton shot that series in 2018 when the Bucks were the 7th seed. They were the plucky young team that, was, can they get out of the first round for the first time in forever? Celtics were the 2 seed, but they were playing that series without Kyrie Irving. Now, you knew Kyrie wasn't returning in that series or playing in the playoffs. There's still ambiguity with Giannis. But that series went the distance. It went 7 games. And I think the Celtics were the betting favorite, but it was very, very slight. And as the series went on, there was more of, I think the Bucks are going to win this series. It was ultimately the Celtics team that had more experience that won. There's some components that remind me of that series. But I would say the biggest difference is the way the Pacers responded in game 2 and looking at game 1, you couldn't tell if it was just a tentative group that was kind of feeling out the playoffs. They looked much more energized, played at a better pace in game 2. And you saw a lot of that confidence in this game tonight, but there were still some moments in the fourth quarter, which again, not to dwell on these things makes it even more frustrating. It seemed like the Pacers were kind of playing hot potato, and there were stretches where you could tell the moment may be getting to them, and guys were not really looking to take the shot. It just felt like if the Bucks could have, we mentioned that Bobby Portis sequence, you could have got it to 5 or 6 and made it a 2-possession game at any point, you'd start to feel good. But that was, one of the stories of this game. It took the Bucks forever to move past that 10 or 11 point mark. And then once they got in front, they could never push it further than 3.
Yeah, I mean, the lead was, felt kind of brief, and they did, have brief 1-possession leads in overtime at a couple points. But I just come back to the offensive rebounding for the Pacers, right? I mean, like, you can screw around and look nervous and take bad shots all you want if you always get the offensive rebound. At some point, you're going to score if you're an NBA team. And unfortunately, that was the case, that we saw. Like, they just had so many, their margin for error on offense was so massive, given the fact that they just kept getting reloads. So, yeah, I mean, it's just too bad that, the Bucks have been a team over the course of the season for all the complaints early, like, they were a very good defensive rebounding team overall this season. They've always been that, under Bud. But this is obviously just, you take Giannis out of the mix, like, it's just a different calculation. And, it was just absolutely fatal today. So I'm going to go ahead and say that this Pacers are going to come out and crash the boards again on Sunday. I don't think they're going to have any fear, of the Bucks running them ragged, in terms of transition. And that's the problem, right? It's like Andre Jackson's like the athletic guy that they have.
Yeah.
Andre can dribble in the open court, but he doesn't know what to do with it when,
it's an adventure.
When he's bearing down on the basket. And so we'll see. But I figure I should mention as well, I mean, we talk about like the kind of ins and outs. I mean, Malik Beasley barely playing tonight. And I mean, it's tough for him, right? I mean, he talked smack against the Pacers during the regular season on whichever podcast that was, doubled down on it, hit a couple shots in the first game, but has pretty much been, pretty absent since then.
Yeah.
And again, the upside is that it's because in part of guys like AJ and Andre getting some run. But I think, I mean, I think there's a Pat Bev conversation to be had, and I think my concern with Pat Bev was always like, the stuff that makes him a really useful regular season player. Like, at what point does his age and just his limitations at this point of his career in the playoffs, like at what point, like, is he just over his skis a little bit?
Yeah.
And we saw it on the last play. Again, that's a really hard play with Halliburton with a head of steam. Like, I don't know if there's anybody on the Bucks roster that was going to do him a whole lot better on that play.
Yeah.
You can argue the Bucks just generally weren't set up well to defend that play. But again, like, it's you're getting a very heavy dosage of Pat Bev in this series.
Yeah.
Like, Doc is sticking with a guy that he knows and trusts, and I think between Bobby and Pat Bev, he's going to sink or swim with those guys, and there's going to be times when it works, and I think there's going to be times when it doesn't. And I think with Pat, it's not so much that he's really good 1v1 on Tyrese. It's more that I think he knows which way to send him, and I think also Pat holds up when he switches better than certainly most point guards, like a campaign or something like that, right? So it's hard, but Pat's also obviously, like, offensively, he's not much of a threat, and he's always trying to, like, push it up the floor, and he's always looking for other guys. So he's kind of a weird offensive player in that regard.
And he does touch the paint quite a bit.
Yeah,
but
he tries to bend the defense, and but the problem is, like, he can't really create advantages. Yeah, he can't really create advantages for himself, right? Which is ultimately kind of what really limits what he can do offensively. So it's hard, I don't know. I mean, I know there's been I saw a lot of people complaining about Doc Rivers, and it's like, I'm not even sure, like, exactly what the complaint was. I think a lot of it's around.
What do you want him to do?
Right. I assume a lot of it's like, well, Bobby and Brooke, like, put them on the bench, but it's like, look.
So
I didn't think either guy distinguished himself. Brooke had some really good moments running pick and roll, diving to the rim. When he missed that shot, when he pulled up and tried to hit that little floater over Halliburton in OT that he missed, I was like, damn it, Brooke, go strong. But yeah, I mean, like, without Giannis, like, your options in the front court are very limited. And if you think going smaller would have made them better at rebounding, like,
I was going to say, like, you're getting crushed in rebounding, so get Brooke and Bobby out of the game. Like, I mean,
I don't know. They're just, the Bucks are this team. I mean, the thesis of this team is you've got Giannis, you got Dame and Khris, and that's going to carry you. You don't have Giannis, everything goes out the window, right? So. Yeah, it's just, I just can't get too bent out of shape over it. It sucks, but if they're not healthy, it's almost irrelevant.
You got to be healthy, you got to be lucky, you got to be good. And the Bucks had all three of those in 2021. They have not had all three of them since 2021. So I don't know if that was part of the deal that the Bucks made to win the title or what. But again,
I'd make it again, by the way. I'll make that bargain again. I'm okay with it.
I would definitely make that again. And look, I think after game 3, after game 4, especially last year, it was pretty apparent where things were headed. After game 3, you didn't feel great. I'm not suggesting you feel good here because, again, the elephant in the room is we don't know if you can expect Giannis back. But my contention is this isn't the same challenge. Not to say it's not a challenge, but this is not the prospects of crawling out of that hole against that Miami Heat team that we ultimately saw go on to the Eastern Conference Finals. And who knows, maybe the Pacers miraculously do the same thing and I eat those words. But it's going to be a challenge. Again, I hate the whole must-win adage. The elimination game is must-win. So Sunday is not a must-win, but it's a, man, you really need to win this game because if you come back to Milwaukee down 3-1, I don't care how veteran of a group you are, especially when you have the skeleton of that team that was there a season ago. You can't, it's human nature. You can't deny that part of that is going to creep in of, oh man, this again, we're we're down 3-1 in the first round, and this is how we go out.
Yeah, and the unfortunate thing is I was just double checking. I mean, you only have 1 day off here before.
There's no more extra rest.
Yeah, and then game 5 is Tuesday, so you don't get. I was kind of hoping like, oh, maybe we get that extra day to Wednesday.
You get Thursday or Wednesday. Yeah, no.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think if Giannis plays Sunday, it's going to be, a very touch and go thing, and like if Giannis, I mean, I don't think if Giannis plays, he's not going to be on a minutes limit, but I just with these soft tissue injuries, like I just don't even at this point. I'm just like, don't even bother.
The downside to it and what it could carry over into next season is the like, don't even touch this.
Yeah. This season, I mean, now with this Dame injury and stuff, like this season is just so cursed, and I realize like you can't just punt on a year when like
prime
your window,
year, right?
When your window is maybe another year after this.
Yeah.
Maybe. But it's this season has just felt like so screwed. Like when you just look back on it, like literally from last summer through to today, it's just the basketball gods just do not seem to want to make this happen for the Milwaukee Bucks. So it is what it is, right? I'll think back finally to 2021, and if that was the bargain, it is what it is. It's too bad. Justin, at least we can play the moral high ground and say that the Bucks, when they're big, when their big three,
they had all of them together,
when all their big three, whether it was Drew and Giannis, Khris, or now Dame and Giannis, Khris, they have not lost since the bubble together. But alas, they have also not actually all been healthy since 2021. So it is what it is. Yeah, it's just too bad. But I don't know. I'm not mad.
No. No, and look, that's the thing is I think we all understand that next year was ideally going to be your peak year when you think about the time it was going to take for Giannis and Dame, and especially when you factor in another new head coach and all of that. But as you mentioned, I don't know if it's borrowed time, but it's an older group. And I mean, you are looking at next year with just the constraints you're going to face with the second apron. And the age of your roster, the fact that it's walk years for Khris Middleton and Brook Lopez, that, I mean, it's easy to explain when you talk about the injuries and everything else, but it's also a lot of pressure for next year of this is basically the last dance for that group, if that's how you approach that season. But again, it's not a conversation we need to have yet. Bucks are still 2 losses away from having that, and we'll see how this team responds on Sunday, because either this is you found the things that worked. Maybe it means more minutes for Andre Jackson Jr. and some different looks and more minutes for some of those younger guys, and that's how we're going to keep up with this Pacers team. Or it's a Pacers team that kind of views this, as we mentioned, some similarities. Part of this felt like that game 3 in Toronto, and granted, that was a different spot where you would have been up 3-0, but you look back at that one and thought, man, that was right there for the taking. You lose in double overtime. If you win that, you're on to the NBA Finals in all likelihood. And maybe it's the same with this. And the Pacers look at it and say, we know we can beat this team. And now we took this game from that we feel like we can put them one step away from elimination on Sunday. But that is the conversation for Sunday. And we'll see how this Bucks team responds. We will be back Sunday nights with the post-game podcast, hopefully recapping an even series at 2 games apiece. For Frank, I'm Justin. We'll talk to you once again Sunday night on Locked On Bucks.